All right, let's get going. I'm sure other people will join in at some point, but I'll get started and we'll go from there. So thank you everyone for joining us today on the webinar on Agentic AI within Datashed 5. I think I know some of you guys here already, but my name's Carl Radford, the Development Manager of maxgeo. So to start off with, I'll give a quick introduction on the AI agents that we're building into Datashed 5. Now, we'll cover off a few key areas. The problem that we're looking at solving, what is Agentic AI, and trying to explain that in nice plain language that everybody can understand. Why we built the AI agents in Datashed 5, what we built. So we've got two separate agents, and I explain kind of how they work. Each one has slightly different use cases. How it actually works, I think that's really, really important to build your trust in the solutions, and is to understand the back of the actual agents and how they all work together. I'll then do a bit of a deep dive into the data insights agent specifically, which is probably more involved and more complex. And I think will probably be used quite significantly across the client base. We'll cover off some safeguards and controls that we put in place, both within the development and also within the architecture. Some risk and assumptions that certainly need to be taken into account. And finally, I'll give you a bit of a demo on Chat with Max. Now, Chat with Max is the term we've coined for our AI agents, and what you'll be able to see in Datashed 5 very, very soon. And to finish off with, obviously, questions and answers, as you guys might have more in-depth questions that you want to cover off. Beautiful. So I just want to start off with, look, we're not replacing expertise. Ultimately, we are aiming just to remove friction. So remove friction to the database and get insights, remove friction to support, and kind of get that on your fingertips within the application without having to go anywhere else. To begin with, I also want to cover off kind of the problems we're hoping to solve by introducing these agents. So I've kind of broken up into a couple different sections, and obviously this is not everything, but for geologists, I think, data access is really, really important. They often really, rely on DBAs to write SQL queries for them and get that data out or build reports or whatever that might be. So this is allowing those guys that might not have access to the SQL database or might not have the knowledge to write those queries or generate those reports, to give them that ability really, really quickly and easy. For DBAs, certainly, I'm sure you guys have repetitive queries that you have to do every now and then, and probably also some very complex queries that you might need to do. You'll find that this agent will certainly help you with that. Through our current testing that we've got at the moment, some of the internal staff actually found that the agent was generating queries far more complex than they could have written themselves, which is also, really, really handy. And that way, they can generate the queries within the agent, and take that query, modify it if they need, or run it against their database themselves. So certainly it helps reduce the speed in generating those queries and the repetitiveness. Ad hoc reporting, I'm sure DBAs have reports that they need to generate quite often. And the data insights agent is able to, build those reports really, really quickly. So it's not necessarily just exporting the data and then having to build those reports yourself. We'll give you a starting point that has all the relative information within that report, and you can add more context if you need, so on and so forth. So again, really reducing the time it takes for you to report for management and other people. And then there's obviously a performance risk around SQL. So not everyone has a lot of experience with SQL. And again, the data insight agent kind of reduces that barrier for entry, and takes the onus necessarily always on the DBA. People can execute some of these queries themselves directly from within Datashed 5. And I'll cover that off in more detail. On the support front, look, we've got a knowledge base agent that's going to be introduced into Datashed 5. Now, what that means is pretty straightforward, right? So instead of you having to go to the service desk, go to that specific version of Datashed 5, find that specific module, scroll down, find all the information, so on and so forth. This is actually going to surface it directly within Datashed 5 and make it really easy. So, instead of trying to go through all those multiple steps and layers to find how to do something, you can just query that agent directly. It will scroll through the knowledge base and just give you the exact answer that you need. Now, this should hopefully improve our service desk load. So, less people querying service desk means that the queries that do come through our service desk that might be a little bit more complex, we can action those tasks a lot quicker and get back to our customers a lot better. So hopefully, on multiple fronts, that's going to help, especially for new users that have never used the software before or might have just done training. It's really, really handy to have that at your fingertips. Cool. Next kind of phrase to sum up the next couple of PowerPoints list. Chatbots talk, agents act, and they act with tools, constraints, and responsibilities. So that's a core difference. Now, I'm sure many of you have gone to service-based websites or banks or whatever that might be, and they've got chatbots up on their websites. Now, a lot of those chatbots are kind of question answer flows. So the agent asks you a question, you answer. Then they ask you another pre-prompted question, you answer. Or they might have generative AI already introduced, and that's just question answer, natural language. But those agents don't really do anything other than just responding to your query. Where what we're building with our AI and agentic agents is, those agents actually be able to perform tasks for you. So what is a AI agent? Ultimately, it's a large language model. There's multiple large language models out there. OpenAI, there's Claude, there's Gemini, so on and so forth. Can kind of go on forever. More and more of those come out every single day. But those large language models work with defined tools, permissions, responsibilities, and execution paths. So unlike your chatbots, they can actually do things. They can call on specific tools that we've created. They can validate and refine responses that have been generated from other agents. And they also operate within constraints that we've enforced. So just to give you a bit of understanding, the data insights agent, which we've created, uses Claude in the background, as well as MCP server, which I'll show you a little bit later on, whilst the knowledge base agent works with OpenAI. So right now, the knowledge base agent is more like your traditional chatbot that I think we were discussing before. It's just a question and answer. That agent will get more functionality over time, but for the moment, it's just question and answer. The data insight agent, on the other hand, has a lot more tools and functionalities, which I'll cover off in the coming sessions. So just a little bit of a workflow diagram. I mean, you can very top level, user will query the agent. The agent can then use tools such as, generate SQL queries. That query can then be run against a database using read-only permissions. Results are then returned back to you as the user. Very top level, but hopefully that helps just explain the difference between the two types of agents and chatbots. So what was our goal when creating these agents? There was a few, and I'll cover them more in detail, but certainly it's to remove some of the technical bottlenecks that you might experience within your teams, simplify your data access, and provide smarter automation. I think I think maxgeo has always been at the forefront of trying to automate processes within your teams and data management as much as possible. And this is just another one of the solutions that we're trying to introduce to save you time, hopefully across the business. So the primary drivers, I think when we started initially conceptualizing this was improving the accessibility to the MDS, having a bit of an interface for people that might not be so database knowledgeable, if that makes sense. Reducing time to write SQL queries and repetitive queries, certainly to improve reporting and to give you insights that you might not necessarily even be thinking of right about now. and to reduce service desk load, and hopefully, obviously, improve the speed that we can get back to you on anything that's a bit more complex. So it's the strategic drivers. There's low technical dependency. As I said before, improve your data democratization, standardize your query patterns. We've got a specific agent that is there to help generate the queries, and we've given them really refined rules that they act against, and also to maintain database governance. And I'll show you kind of how all that works together as we go through this presentation. So there's two purpose-built agents, one primarily for support, as I said, and one to give you insights into your data. We've coined them Chat with Max, so you will see a little icon, and I'll show you kind of how that looks when you get into Datashed 5, and you'll have two options to choose between. One is obviously the knowledge base, and one is your data insights. Now, the knowledge base, as I mentioned before, is it's basically OpenAI, which is directly connected to our knowledge base by API. What that means is, as we're updating our knowledge base, it's automatically synced through to the agent. So you don't need to go through scrolling through the various versions, so on and so forth, to find that information. Everything will be surfaced directly within those agents. And we provide it in a very accurate way. So, if you're asking about exporting a scheme, for argument's sake, in the section that I've got there, or layouts, it will give you the exact step-by-step requirements you need to follow, which is obviously a lot easier than trying to troll through service desk and knowledge base at the moment. The data insight agents, on the other hand, which we probably spent a lot more time on refining. Now, this converts your natural language queries into SQL, and it has read-only connection to your database, which will then run that query against the database, provide you the SQL query back. It will give you structural table outputs. It will give you word reports, but it will also give you other things, like you can actually create charts, or you can analyze specific data sets, and so on and so forth. So it's got a lot of benefit in actually getting insights into the database and producing things that might take you a little bit longer yourself. So how do we actually do this, and how do we get accurate responses? I'm sure there's a dime a dozen comments out there around the accuracy of AI, and obviously for us, in our case, in mining and geology, we have to be very accurate with the responses and the data we're getting back. And I think this was a bit of a challenge for us to begin with, when we first started on this journey 6 months ago, and kind of before I get into the rest of the architecture, we kind of had one agent that was looking at the entire database. So you can imagine basically trying to put ChatGPT onto your database. Now, ChatGPT doesn't have the context of the database, or the structure, or the relationships. So when you're querying in that environment, it doesn't really know what it's looking for. So your responses and your accuracy are very low. Now, to improve that, we've implemented MCP, which is a Model Context Protocol, and that's built up on Bedrock, and I'll cover that off a little bit later on. But Model Context Protocol helps multiple agents all work together, and I'll kind of explain how that all works in the slides here. So if you can imagine, to keep it nice and simple while you guys have a look at that slide, I'm going to take maxgeo as an example. We've got our director Viv, which I think most of you know. Now, Viv might go, hey, I want to create a QA/QC report for this client, a specific client, pick a client. Now, to create that report, he might need multiple people to be involved in generating that report. Let's say it's a pretty complex report. So he might go to a geologist and say, hey, I need a QA/QC report. Can you please go have a look at this database and work out what information and data do I need to create this report? Now, that geologist is going to go to our SQL expert and say, hey, can you go write this SQL query for me so I can get the correct data? Here's the tables that I need you to go to, so on and so forth. The SQL generates the queries and passes that back to the geo, who then executes that query against the database and gets the data. That geo will then go build that into a report with all the charts and content and everything else, and maybe it's finally passed to a senior geo who is then going to analyze a report, clean it up if need be, and pass that back to Viv. So in this context, Viv is MCP. He is the guy that's coordinating the various people to do the various tasks. And underneath MCP, or that's sitting with MCP, are all the various agents. Now we're building quite a significant amount of agents, and each agent has their domain. So for argument's sake, we've got an assay agent, a DH, a PT, face sampling, so on and so forth, kind of goes on. Those agents are trained with all the knowledge on those specific tables. So rather than having one agent that is looking at every single table within the database, we have an agent that is highly intelligent and trained on specific set of tables. So for example, assays is about 77 different tables that agent is trained up on. It is very context aware of all the tables and relationships between those tables, so on and so forth. Okay, so as a user, if you are to query that specific agent and say, hey, I want to find out my assay results for the year 2025 and which one's got the highest results, then we're just going to go directly to the assay agent who's got the content, who's then going to pass it on to the MCP tool server, who's going to generate the SQL queries, which is then going to be executed against the database, and again back to the tool server to then create the reports and the charts and everything else, and eventually get passed to another agent that's actually going to be looking over all those responses and ensuring everything is correct, and then passing it back to the user. Now, MCP is fantastic at running that loop multiple times. So if Claude, the LLM who's sitting behind everybody, is analyzing the results and saying, hey, this doesn't actually look right, go again and do it again. So that might be like Viv getting the first iteration of the QA/QC and saying, mate, what's going on here? You're missing this chart, you're missing this data, go back and do it again. And that loop continues until that language model is happy with the responses, and then that returns back to you as the end user. So hopefully that kind of explains a little bit about how the orchestration works behind the scenes. Each, as I said, each domain has table awareness. It knows all the relationship, and there's also guardrails in place. So it specifically stays within the knowledge it has. It does not go anywhere. So if I've got an assay agent, it does not go looking at DH tables or pass information on DH tables. It is only looking at assay tables, and that is all it knows. Cool. So I think the next kind of slide I will run through now is insights into data agents. Look, there's a very controlled flow that goes on. I kind of gave you a bit of an insight to that just before. And to cover off some of the key controls we've actually got in place to give you the comfort and confidence in using the app and the agents with the permissions that's been enforced. So as a very quick overview of the flow, a user submits a question. There's intent classification. So we'll identify, okay, this is an assay question. Let's go to the assay domain agents. The domain agent's been selected, which then goes to the SQL agent, which generates a SQL. The SQL then gets validated to ensure that that actually looks correct and it's meeting our requirements. That's executed against a read-only connection. That is the only connection that agent has with your database. And I'll cover this off in more detail as we go. Results then return to LLM. The SQL query is exposed to you as the end user, so you can validate, ensure that information is correct. Results is synthesized, so all the data that comes back, again, run through the LLM. It adds context into the reports and information and provides you insights and feedback, so on and so forth. And everything is then passed back to the user in the front-end interface. So what's extremely critical to understand for everybody that's using it, we've put multiple safeguards in place, and I'm going to cover this off in even more detail as we go. But some of the key controls we put in place here are, permission is passed from Datashed 5. So when you log into Datashed 5, you've selected a database and you've been assigned to specific data sets. That information is passed through to the AI agent as well as the user permission only. So even if you're an admin level permission within Datashed 5, when you query that agent, you will only ever have the user permissions. In other words, you can only view, you cannot do anything else on that database. No DML, so no insert, update, or delete functionality is included within the agents. And that's hard baked into the coding in the background. So it cannot do any schema modifications, read only, as I was saying before. And we've also put some controls over the query size limits and timeout limits. So, the agent's not going to build some crazy query that's going to go on for the next half an hour. There's some controls around all of that to ensure that what you're getting back is as accurate as we can without overloading your server. There's multiple layered safeguards that we put in place, and I'll cover how we govern the access and what auditability you have when using these agents. Again, I think pretty important for everybody is knowing what's actually been run on the database, if anything was run, and how that actually works. So we've kind of looked at this on 4 key sections, and I have covered some of this off, so I'll kind of skim through this a little bit. But there's technical controls in place. So read-only SQL credentials, this is passed in multiple ways. So first, when you come through Datashed 5, we're only ever passing user permission to the agent, and also the connection from the agent to the database is read-only. It's only ever going to be read-only, and that is it. So it has no control over the database other than executing those queries to read the data back. There's a SQL validation level built within, restricted schema and table access, so can't access absolutely everything within your database. Execution timeouts, I've already told, and structural prompt constraints. So again, within the agents, the multiple agents, they have specific prompts that prevent them from doing anything other than what they are designed and the domains that they've been trained into. AI controls domain constrained agents again. So each agent, again, only acts on what it knows. You cannot ask the agent, hey, tell me what the price of apples is at Coles. It's going to have absolutely zero idea. And it will just come back to you and say, hey, sorry, I'm a data insights agent. Please ask me questions about your database. Has no external internet access at all. So it cannot go query the internet or pass that data to the internet or anything else. It is all completely controlled within the domain. No cross-database access or cross-environmental querying. So again, all that information is passed through Datashed 5 and your connection is passed in through the agent directly to that database with read-only access. And session-level context isolation. So again, only in the chat that you are working in does it have context of. It does not remember the other conversations you might have had or other conversations other people have had. It immediately forgets that information. So it's only session level context. Operational controls, I'll cover this off a bit later. With AWS, we've got some continuous monitoring, full query audit trail, which you can always go back onto if you need. Version control and control deployments, that's all with our CI/CD and deployment processes, and also access controls. So I know this was a question that's been brought up a few times by other users. You'll be able to toggle these agents on and off within Datashed 5 admin. So if you only want people to use the knowledge base agent for argument's sake, you can switch the data insights off if you like. Enforcing user level permission, multiple stages. I've already covered that off a few times. So yeah, certainly there's multiple ways that we're controlling what that agent can do, and layer on layer, ensuring that it cannot do anything outside of the bounds of what it's been programmed to do. Now, we work with AWS pretty closely. We use a lot of their tools all over the place, Amazon Bedrock being one of these. And this Amazon Bedrock is AWS's solution for Agentic AI. That's where MCP lives. That's where all the actual action happens. And the enterprise agreement we have with Amazon, as well as with Claude and Anthropic, which we're using for the data insights, covers a whole range of insurances to make sure that your data is safe. So there's no model training. Okay, it's not used to train or improve any of their foundational models. Zero retention at all for any of the information that gets passed to the LLM. Data isolation, so it's not shared, any of your prompts or responses are not shared with Anthropic. And all the processing happens within the AWS managed environment, which we look after. Encryption in transit and at rest. There's a private connectivity within AWS directly to Anthropic, so everything is within AWS. It does not go, or it's not exposed at all to the public internet. Obviously, having it up in Bedrock and the integration working through there, we get supported by various frameworks, security frameworks, which we've got listed on that side there. So GDPR, ISO, so on and so forth. Now, on top of the guardrails, we've already built into DataShed 5 as well as the AI agent. There's also guardrails that Bedrock will put in place too. So filtering sensitive data, redact PY2, and blocked unsafe outputs. Okay, so it analyzes that information and just make sure nothing comes back that is not safe. Regional controls in place and access controls are already in place. Now, if you like any of this information, we'll have this all up on our knowledge base pretty soon. But I just need to skip through some of this to demo as quick as possible. So considerations you need to take into account, obviously this is AI. AI is as good as we can get it. We've improved the results quite significantly with our internal testing, with the recent releases and the additional agents that we've built. The results are coming back quite accurate. But with that, there is still obviously some need to ensure that you are having a look at the responses and not taking that as gospel. So a couple of risks that come into place, incorrect query interpretation. So that's on two fronts. Your query to the agent, be as direct as you possibly can. If you give it a very vague query, it's going to give you a very vague response. And on the same side, at times the SQL query that gets returned might not be 100% accurate. And that's why we provide that SQL visibility to you as an end user, so as DBAs can go and validate that information, make sure that query is correct and the data that you're analyzing is correct too. There could be some performance bottlenecks on larger data sets, and again, queries that are generated. So we put some row limits within the system. And again, depending on what you're trying to analyze, it's very important that you're aware of it, but we also notify you within the agent if it does hit any of those limits. Over trust in general results, obviously, like I said before, DBA or someone, a geologist, actually auditing that information is extremely important. Make sure that it's correct before you pass it on to anyone else. Hallucinations. Look, I think we luckily managed to get on top of the hallucinations, and the results are coming back pretty accurately. And that was all mitigated through multi-agent design. So this will only improve over time, and as the usage continues with everybody, we can really optimize the agents to get the answers even more accurate as we go along. Some assumptions, obviously, your users are assigned to the correct database and to the correct data sets that will get passed to that agent, and the agent can only operate on that database and data sets. And you guys, all users, to validate outputs before any decisions are made. Now, finally, before I jump into the demo, because I know I'm running a bit short on time, what this is not, it's not autonomous database control. It cannot do things for you, cannot update data, cannot delete data, cannot modify your database. It is not predictive analysis in any way, shape, or form, not yet at least. It's not to modify your data or your database. It's not to replace DBAs in any way, shape, or form, and it's not bypassing security controls. It is a very controlled interface layer between you and your geological database and helping you guys get insights into your data. So hopefully I did not go too far into that presentation. I will just quickly share one moment the actual agent now. Give me a second. Beautiful. And I'll give you a very quick demo. Logged out. Beautiful. So when you log into DataShed 5, you'll see down the bottom right-hand side here, you've got this little chat icon down the bottom. If you are to select that icon, my internet is not too slow, you'll see our two options. One's got a little headset, that's your knowledge base agent, and the other one is your data insight agent. So if I click on that, you can see I've already got some conversations that I had in the session, but pretty straightforward. You can ask it any questions on how to use the software. So for argument's sake, how do I import an assay file? As I mentioned before, all this information is coming from our knowledge base, direct API integration to it. It is going through and scanning everything on our knowledge base and will give us a very direct response on how to import an assay file. You don't need to go through Service Desk and click through everything. So it gives you a step-by-step instruction on what you need to do. Choose import data, select your file type, create a new layout, load the file, select assay, match your field, save layout, load the data, so on and so forth. So it goes through the whole process. It's pretty straightforward. It's pretty handy. This can be undocked and moved around the screen as you need. If you do have to jump between any other steps, so for example, you actually want to follow that steps, and the first step is go to import data. You can do that independently, and it'll keep that session open for you, and you can keep going through the steps as you go. Forgive me if my internet is a little bit slow, folks. One moment for it to reload. Just to actually let everyone know, as I go through this demo, this agent that we're looking at currently is our early release, and there we go, popped up. No, excuse me, my internet's a bit slow. So it's a lot quicker when it's actually operating. This is all in a development environment. So the agent is not going to be the final agent that you'll be seeing. It's a lot more optimized and will be working a lot quicker than what was currently happening just then. So that was the knowledge base agent. We then have the SQL agent or the data insights agent. Again, I've kind of just put a couple queries in there already based on the session so that we can just jump into it straight away. And then I'll show you how it works in a second. So, you know, the query I had here was count the number of samples in each drill hole in the Botswana data set where the sample depth is between 10 meters and 50. I might just expand this slightly. So you can see it goes, runs away, and comes back with a bit of a summary of all the drill holes, a bunch of samples, and the query that was used, as well as a little chart that you can use. So again, for the DBAs out there, people with access can copy that query, take it, have a look at it, modify it if you need be, so on and so forth. So this agent can create charts, it can analyze your data, and it can also create reports. So I'll just quickly reload this one that I created here. So this one was, you know, create a drilling report for the DEXP project. Again, it goes away, analyzes everything, comes back with exec summary, project overview, data summaries, so on and so forth. So this report can be downloaded, which I'll do right now. And I'll just show you an example of what that report looks like. Here we go. There we go. So as I mentioned, you know, we try to get as much information as we possibly can for you. It should be quite accurate, but at the same time, you know, geologists or DBA will review this information, make sure it's correct, add any context in as they need, and away they go. But hopefully this takes away the initial workload that you need to do and gives you the starting point that you can jump straight into everything as quick as possible. So I won't go too far through this report, but obviously it's quite detailed in its analysis and key findings and recommendations, you know, exploring specific targets, vectors, interpretations, you know, quality assurance, data management, so on and so forth. So it's obviously quite in depth, and this report agent that we've created can be customized and built as users start working with it and giving us information. So just so that you know that I'm not just selecting something that's was already there, let's just actually test this agent out. So I'll put it in a query. Each batch to assayed in 2025. Now, this might take a bit of time, obviously, with my connection and the development environment, but for you guys, it'll be pretty quick and seamless. It actually came back pretty quick. So here's the maximum gold assay values for each batch assayed in 2025. It gives you your batches and your SQL query used. So you can take that query, go away, and just ensure that's correct. Again, you know, the SQL agent has been improved and the query agent been improved quite significantly. So this is still an early version. Let's just do one more before I open up to questions. So create a report on the number of drill holes per data sets that were ETM. So this is going to the flows in the back end. Obviously, this will be going to a specific domain agent, getting the necessary information, passing that on to the SQL agent, executing against the database, going back and forth in that whole process up until it's got the information correct, passing that to the language model, building your report, so on and so forth, and then displaying that report in just a second. So as you can imagine, it does take a little bit of time, so bear with it, but the results are quite impressive. Now, while that's loading up, guys, I'm happy to, as I'm running a bit short on time and I'm already over. If anyone has any questions, feel free to fire away now, and we can just wait for that prompt to come back. Just have a look. Feel free to raise your hand if anyone has any questions, and I can unmute you. Adrian, I'll just unmute you there, mate. 1 second. You just might need to unmute yourself, Adrian, and then you can fire away. Sorry, Adrian, you might just need to unmute on your end. Okay, no worries. You'll type instead. While Adrian's typing there, guys, you can see, again, it's gone through, it's created a comprehensive report for us, breakdown by data sets, 1990, we got 1 hole, 2023, 93, 2024, 6 holes, so on and so forth. Key insights, generated us a Word report, generated us a chart, and I can now download that document if I want, and away we go. Okay, while Adrian is just typing a question there for us, I will. Okay, so Adrian's question was, with exports, can it apply filters, and if so, do filters stay active on the database? So Adrian, that really comes down to your prompts that you query it. So it doesn't pass on the filters from datashed 5 other than the data sets that has been assigned to that end user. So really the filter comes when you create that prompt or that query. So in other words, analyze this data set, or have a look at this drill hole, so on and so forth. So it doesn't stay active on the database. As I mentioned, this is all, the agent is kind of separate. It only has view access. It does no other control in the database. So it really comes down to the query that you pose the agent to get that information back. Hopefully that answers your question. Feel free to ask some more after that. And Kim, you should be unblocked if you got some questions.
Yeah, you mentioned during the slide deck that there's a limit to the number of rows. Can you give an idea about that, please?
So I cannot give the precise limit. I'll speak to Abdul, who's designed in the background, and we'll get some information out. That'll be up in the knowledge base. But yeah, ultimately that's just to prevent really long running queries and data sets come back.
Okay, thanks.
But that'll be all up on a knowledge base once this is released. I think Adrian's typing. I think that'll be the last question unless anyone else has any, and we will wrap this up. Fantastic. Yep. So Adrian, for everyone that can't see that, knowledge base queries, it'll be useful to append the link to where in the knowledge base it came from if you want to see more. Look, fantastic suggestion. The way we've designed it via the API, that might not be possible, but I'll certainly look into that with our developers to see if we can improve on that. But yes, certainly we're more than open to any suggestions from everybody on new features and enhancements. Alrighty, well, thank you very much for everyone's time. Sorry for running a little bit over on the demo. Look, this is a very early pass and initial developments. We do plan on having the final release version ready in a couple of months, so everyone will see that coming out, and we'll do another round of communication to everyone so you're aware. Thank you very much for your time, guys. I hope you found it useful.
Thanks, Carol.
Thanks, everybody. Cheers. Bye.